Nixon, of course, had other problems like impeachment, and he stuck that report on a shelf and did nothing about it. But it was a very strong endorsement for bringing the U.S. population growth to a stop. Now, we have totally failed to do that. We now have terrible shortages of water. We are now 65% dependent on imported oil. We have traffic jams all over the place. The U.S. population has more than doubled in my lifetime, and it clearly has had a huge effect on the quality of life. So, and certainly the other species that inhabit the country with us have suffered dramatically. So to say that we're at this number and we need this number, the reasoning behind that needs to be understood, because if it is, well, we have some aging people and we need a whole lot more to support them, well, will those other people not get old? Will they not need support? I mean, how are we going to keep this going? Well, when they get to be old, we'll need a whole lot more people to support them. Is that the model? And when does it end? Because are we going to say, well, right now Australia is at, what's the population, 21 million? 21.6. So, no, and you're at a doubling time of about 40 years. So in 40 years, you'll be at 42, 43 million. So then, if you get some rain, yeah. And then, well, there'll be a bunch of retiring people then, so why don't we grow to 60 million? You know, we should make premiership only available to people who've been trained in ecology. But the issue is, if you want to have a short-term kick in order to accomplish something, and your motivation is re-election, and you're getting donations from the real estate developers, and you see something that will, you know, increase the GDP numbers, even though the per capita numbers may be going down, then great reasoning, but it's not going to serve the long-term interests of the country, and the long-term interests of the country have to be put on the front page.
Ozzy? Our SBS Television is one of our national television producers and is currently running a series on population, and they are focusing on the non-replacement ratio, and they're saying, you know, these Western countries are going to be diabolical strife, they're going to collapse unless we suddenly start increasing our population. And they're just very narrowly looking at what's happening to the country's population on the basis of births and ignoring immigration or anything like that. It may be an interesting series you might try and get hold of. It's quite fascinating to see how blinkered and how very, very distorted they are in what they're actually presenting.
It's Thursday night, 8:30.
All right.
And also misrepresenting the difference between actual population growth rate and fertility rate.
Yes.
They don't recognise that for a long time you can still have a growing population even though your fertility rate is below replacement. I mean, for instance, in Australia at the present time we have roughly twice as many births as deaths, leaving aside entirely immigration.
Well, in the U.S., we have a lot of people in the media putting out, although it's declined a little bit, but there have been a lot of articles about the birth dearth. We're at above replacement level fertility, and we have more than half of our growth driven by immigration. So 3 million net growth per year is a birth dearth to these people. And it is just misinformation. And perhaps intentional misinformation, because somebody sees the benefit to them of population growth, but it is very short-term thinking.
At this point, I must make a plug for Mark and Bill's book, because that's exactly what that book is about, all the mistruths about the population arguments. Yeah.
If you, excuse me, I have a question. If you have the problem in America that we have here, that occasionally, if one says we should reduce our immigration, one is actually called a racist. I've been called a racist. I've had a lot of people have, on the grounds that they say you should stop immigration except for, say, family reunions. And it's a very brutal attack to get.
Yes.
Just because, boom, you're a racist.
Yeah, it is. It's very difficult to deal with it. And, you know, you have to be very careful that you're talking about numbers and not talking about ethnic groups. But indeed, every country has a right to determine how many people are going to cross its borders. And so one way I try to address this, being a liberal and having a lot of liberal friends who think, well, we should invite all of Africa and Latin America to move here because they could improve their lives. You know, I say, well, it's a great idea, you know, just, in fact, there have been studies that show how many people want to move to the United States. In Nicaragua, it's 67% of the population, when surveyed, would move to the U.S. And you can go country by country and look at those surveys. What percentage of the population would move to the U.S. if we opened our border? And you add it up, and maybe over 1 billion people would come tomorrow. So I say, okay, well, we have 305 million now. Would you like 1 billion on top of that tomorrow? And by the way, where would they sleep? And oh, well, can't have that many. Well, then what's the right number? And you know, try to get them to answer the question of what is the right number. And well, what about the water situation? What about the oil? How are we going to provide petroleum to those people? And try to get them to answer the question for you, as opposed to just saying the word immigration, which clearly can't be avoided, but it is a very hot potato issue, obviously.